Today, she will share with you some of her personal, professional experiences that have shaped her career. This occupational therapist wears many hats. Barbara Smith.
Thank you. I put the video on. When I needed to choose a college major back in the early 1970s, I was part of the generation that was trying to find itself. I didn't think of a major that would enable me to earn a living, but instead majored in English because I love to read. As fate had it, I ended up working with adults with developmental disabilities in a variety of settings, including community residences. I lived with 9 disabled men who had just moved out of a large institution, Willowbrook State Institution in New York. This was an infamous institution because there had been photographs and videotapes made of abuse and neglect. It was in the media, and this was the impetus to moving people out of the institutions and into the communities. My job title was house mother, even though the men I took care of ranged in age from 25 to 62 years, and I was only 23 years old, and I had never been a mother. I had a previous job where the residents were called the kids or the children. I think that political correctness is a wonderful thing when adults are no longer called the children, and are no longer given Mickey Mouse lunchboxes to bring to work or Donald Duck t-shirts to wear. I didn't expect to end up working in an institution after I became an occupational therapist. But I worked for 6 happy years at the Hogan Regional Center in Danvers. My job was to design activities for the residents in the day program. These residents, or actually consumers as they are currently called these days, ranged in ability levels from being severely, profoundly, mentally disabled to having milder disabilities where they actually earned a paycheck. Many of them were physically disabled in wheelchairs. Many of them demonstrated autistic-like behaviors such as flicking their hands or self-injurious behaviors such as biting themselves. My goal was to decrease the negative behaviors such as screaming and increasing the positive behaviors such as using their hands to manipulate objects. I went to stores, I went through catalogs trying to find materials that would be appropriate to use with them. And not juvenile. I didn't want toys. I didn't find anything really useful. And then I discovered that I have a long-hidden, innate ability to make successful therapeutic activities out of trash, but I will call them today, recycled materials such as newspapers and detergent bottles and cardboard boxes. My book, The Recycling Occupational Therapist, describes how to design, fabricate, and use these different activities for children and adults who have developmental disabilities. You can learn more about my work on my website, recyclingot.com. For 9 years, I worked in the public schools. Many of the children had learning disabilities and mild fine motor delays. If you are a parent or a grandparent, you will know what I mean when I say that children these days have so much expected of them. And a lot of stress. There is so much they need to learn. There is so much homework they have to do, and hours of homework, and not enough time to relax and play. However, as an occupational therapist, I can tell you that play, gross and fine motor activities, games, play, arts and crafts, singing and dancing, and imaginary play, such as dressing up in pretend clothing and using pretend carpentry tools or play carpentry tools, are essential in order for children to develop the sensory and the motor and the cognitive skills in order to learn how to read and write. Many of the preschool children who were referred to me for evaluations, the little kids, the 3, 4, and 5-year-olds, they had fine motor delays. I didn't think it was because they had a disability, but rather because they were young, immature, and they lacked these early experiences that I just described to you that would help them to learn how to read and write. I set about to remedy this situation. I wrote my new book titled From Rattles to Writing, A Parent's Guide to Hand Skills, and it's actually at this moment the cover is being designed by the graphic designer, and then it's off to the printer, and it will be available for purchase over the summer, I hope. The book is written for parents who have children who are typically developing. However, parents and teachers and therapists who work with children with disabilities would also be able to use the many strategies in this book that will help children to learn. For example, children may buy this lacing board, sold for little preschool-age children. But notice there's a lot of holes. I counted them. There's 25 holes. And they're tiny little holes. This activity is designed to develop eye-hand coordination. But it's not easy to use. So I made my own lacing board by cutting a piece of cardboard. I cut 4 holes, and they are large holes, and I used a large piece of cord rather than this skinny little piece of string. This is much easier for children to use for learning. At around this time, my mother was starting to demonstrate signs of confusion. She was always a little neurotic and anxious and erratic, but now she was getting lost in her neighborhood, she was burning food, she was wearing the same clothing day after day. My mom had been a widow for many, many years. She had little social stimulation, making her a prime candidate for developing Alzheimer's disease. She was living in a senior citizens apartment complex in Connecticut, located a mile away from my sister. They didn't offer any services. My sister had been giving her daily phone calls or visits for the previous 4 years, and now it was my turn. And my turn lasted 8 long years. In my book, Still Giving Kisses, A Guide to Helping and Enjoying the Alzheimer's Victim You Love, I describe how my husband, my 12-year-old son, and I kidnapped my mother, moved her into an assisted living facility in Danvers, where this is a beautiful home that has a special wing for people with memory impairment. My anxious, neurotic, irritable, complaining, annoying, I could go on, mother transitioned into a compliant, happy. She had a penchant for playing games, singing and dancing. She was an exercise guru mother. The structure and the nurturing staff did wonders, and the antidepressants didn't hurt either. My book, titled Still Giving Kisses, reflects one of the last motor skills my mother still had just a few days before she passed away. She could no longer speak. She was bedridden. She didn't use her hands, and she had stopped eating. Yet, when I walked into the room, her face lit up, and she puckered her lips to tell me to indicate that I should bring my cheek over for a kiss. As an occupational therapist, I look at the skills a person has, not only at the skills they have lost. And this was one of the most important emotionally laden motor skills I have ever seen, and I will never forget. 6 years ago, life was challenging. I worked in the schools where the parents wanted their children fixed. My mother had Alzheimer's disease, and my son, who has Asperger's syndrome, was getting ready to graduate from high school. Asperger's syndrome is a neurological disorder where the person, it's considered to be on the autism spectrum. The person typically has sensory sensitivities, social and communication challenges. And they're often very, very intelligent, like my son, who is extremely intelligent, and at this very moment he is backpacking on the Appalachian Trail by himself, probably in the rain.
Oh, boy.
Oh, I am very proud of him. 5 years ago, I went to a lecture, a presentation at the Hogan Regional Center, the very same institution that I told you I had worked at years ago, to hear a woman named Temple Grandin. Have any of you heard of Temple Grandin? You've heard of Temple Grandin. Okay, she's been in the media a lot. She has a PhD in animal science. She has written books about her autism and her special relationships with animals. Temple Grandin is a renowned lecturer, and she didn't learn how to speak until she was well over 4 years of age. I was inspired to learn about hippotherapy. Hippotherapy is a specialty area where an occupational therapist works using a horse as a treatment tool. Sometimes I get to wear this hat when doing hippotherapy. The children that I work with are very young. They have developmental disabilities, including autism. The sensory stimulation they receive while sitting on the horse and feeling the horse and the smell of the horse and the sound of the horse and the whole entire equine environment, that emotional bond that they develop with the horse and the many activities that I ask them to perform, helps develop their strength, their balance, their postural control, their motor coordination, and their coordination skills, because they need to tell that horse to go, or they point to go. They need to pull the reins to stop, to steer, and control that horse. I also currently work with seniors who have low vision impairments. I go to their homes. They have low vision impairments due to diseases such as macular degeneration or glaucoma. The first thing I do is go to the patient's home to do an evaluation and write a treatment plan describing what skills I will help them work on. I might teach them new strategies new techniques for reading and writing. I explain to them how different types of adaptive equipment can help them, technology can help them. I might refer them to a low vision optometrist who can prescribe very strong glasses, and I give them a lot of information. The adaptive equipment that I might recommend for them is not necessarily expensive or complicated. For example, this yellow piece of paper is a form of adaptive equipment because it's yellow and has bold lines. It's easy to read and write using this paper. People with macular degeneration are sensitive to light and glare. And yellow paper absorbs light, whereas white paper reflects light, creating glare. So this is more comfortable for someone with that disease to use. So a simple example of adaptive equipment. The good news is that Medicare pays for my services if the patient qualifies. They need to have a certain amount of vision loss to qualify. And they often have secondary insurance. But if they don't have that secondary insurance, I can afford to forego that 20% that Medicare doesn't pay for because I work independently and I don't share my fees with an agency. Therefore, I never ask the patient for money. I have brochures here that describe my low vision business and my hippotherapy business on the North Shore, so you are welcome to pick up a brochure and learn more about my work. I would like to thank you for this opportunity to talk to you today about my personal and professional experiences during the past 20-plus years. I know you're thinking I've been 39 for a very, very long time, right? Okay. I love being an occupational therapist because I get to be creative and help my clients. Even though my mother passed away 3 years ago, I still get to work with seniors who have low vision. I love working with children doing hippotherapy because it's incredible to see a child who cannot walk experience mobility, sitting on a horse, controlling her mobility by using her body, her voice, and her hands, building the self-esteem, the confidence, and the motivation to be all that she can. And that is what occupational therapy is all about.